All right, so bread metaphor, take two. Jesus said, I am the bread of life. All of this began early in the 6th chapter of John, when Jesus fed the hungry crowds with 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, which proves the axiom, feed someone and you've got a friend, or a codependent. And just what he didn't want to happen happened. They saw the food, they saw Jesus, but they didn't see the hand of God at work in the meal, in the providing of the food. So Jesus took the opportunity to point out their self-centeredness. He called them to examine their own motives. Uncomfortably, it was a call for us to examine our motives. I invited you last week to make a list of those things that were most important in your life, the things you couldn't live without. So how many of you went home and made that list? Yeah, me either. Yeah, so maybe today. I don't know. We'll see. Probably not. Jesus took the focus of their attention, that was the bread, and he turned it into a metaphor. Now this metaphor has more power than we often understand. In fact, if you go to the grocery store, and I was going to go to Safeway and take a picture of the bread section, you know what the bread section looks like. It's a million choices. In fact, just the name bread section says something. You know, that's not how it was in Jesus' time. They didn't go down to Safeway or Kroger's if you're back east. In the Middle East, bread was not just something extra at a meal. You know, like, oh, you know, is there a roll with this meal? We had a nice roll yesterday with our meal. But it was crucial. They would take a piece of the pit of bread and they would use it and scoop up the main meal and they would eat it. Without the bread, there was no meal. For those who were the non-elite of the day, 50% of their calories came from bread. See, what I'm saying is, it's not just a metaphor. It's a metaphor that's urgent. There's an urgency about this metaphor that sometimes we don't see. We hear, I'm the bread of life, and we say, oh, cool. You know, sentence structure is good. We understand it's a metaphor. But there's something urgent in this that they would have heard, and sometimes we miss. In some ways, it's a simple metaphor, but yet it is immensely complex and greatly nuanced. So I want to take a look a little bit about some of the complexity, some of the nuance that's involved in this metaphor. Now, first thing we need to know is when Moses was going to talk to Pharaoh, God sent him, and Moses said, who shall I say sent me? I certainly can't go to Pharaoh and say, my name's Moses and I think you should let the people go. Probably wouldn't have worked. So he said to God, who should I say is sending me? And God said, tell them, I am sent you. I am sent you. That is that which is ultimate. And so when Jesus says, I am the bread of life, he's making a connection with God. He's saying there's a unity here. I am bread of life. There's a unity. And that's why, as Mike read, almost immediately after Jesus said, I'm the bread of life, the religious leaders said, who does he think he is? Claims to be from God. They got it. They understood. Now this is the first of 7 I ams in the Gospel of John. I'm the way, the truth, the life. I am the bread. I am the light. I'm the door. Probably I missed 1 or 2. But Jesus is claiming something massive here. When he says, I am the bread of life, he's not just saying, here's a nice little metaphor for you. He's claiming something massive. A unity with God. Unity with God. And they get it. Sometimes we don't. Now we could simply stop here and be in awe. Right? Jesus has a unity with God. And in the beginning of the Gospel of John, remember, Jesus was involved in creation of the world. At the very beginning, he was there. We could stop right here in awe. Be amazed. But there's more to it. Jesus doesn't stop here. He expands this metaphor by referencing the Exodus experience, the most powerful faith experience for the Hebrew people. As the Exodus from Egypt changed everything, it took the people out of slavery, out of bondage. As it changed everything, then so too now Jesus changes everything in this new kingdom of God, the people of God. By referencing manna in the wilderness, and he said your ancestors ate manna in the wilderness. By referencing that, Jesus is making some unmistakable claims. He's going to the heart of their story. First, this miraculous manna that brought life is more than matched by the life-giving bread of Jesus. So Jesus is comparing himself to Moses. Moses brought you life for the day. But I come and I bring you life for more. So he's comparing himself to Moses, and that's quite a comparison. Just as God called and used Moses to lead and feed God's people, now God is using Jesus to lead and feed God's new people. Jesus is claiming some heavy stuff. Third, while the manna of Moses was temporary, the bread of heaven is eternal. There's a lot of content in this metaphor. So if we simply hear, I'm the bread of life, and think, oh, okay, that's a metaphor, we're missing a whole lot. People who listened did not. They understood what he's saying. So given the complexity of all of this, there are two messages that Jesus has for his would-be followers. The first message is represented by this picture up here. Anyone know who painted this picture? Norman Rockwell. Norman Rockwell. I know you. If you got closer, you would see. You'd recognize right away. So let me tell you about this picture. The pastor has somebody who's going up on the ladder because pastors shouldn't climb ladders, they might fall and hurt themselves. And the sign says, lift up your eyes. Lift up your eyes. And if you look higher in the picture, you can't really tell from here, but Jesus is up in the archway. And if you look at all the people, everyone's head's down. You can tell they're going fast, they're not paying attention to anything else, they're just on their way. Some have briefcases, some have coats, some have satchels, some have, as you might expect, pipes. And so what he's calling them to do is look up, and they're all looking down. Look to God is the message, and they're all just too busy. They're all just too busy. So the first message that's represented here is that of lift up your eyes. That is, look for God. We often think of God as up. And so that kind of metaphor, look to God. Lift up your eyes. It takes the eyes of faith to see. That's part of what Jesus is saying this morning. Now, within this message, there are two problems represented by two different groups of people in this gospel passage. The first problem is that some people are not looking at all. Some people are just not looking for God. It becomes more and more evident in our culture. That's how it is. More and more people are not looking. And that becomes the first problem. Now in John 6, these people are represented by the Jewish leaders who write Jesus off immediately because they know who he is. They know whose son he is. They've seen him grow up. They're familiar with him. And that's part of the problem for us. Sometimes we get so familiar with our daily routine or what we like that we forget to look for God. So that's a major problem. It's hard to see when you're not really looking. Some of you may have seen the movie Erin Brockovich. Anyone know who starred in it? Julia Roberts. Yes. Well, as you watch this movie, Erin Brockovich is a real-life woman who battled a company that was polluting the water around her city and causing people to get sick. And so it was a great battle for her. So as you're watching the movie, you see Julia Roberts portraying Erin Brockovich. But in that movie, Erin Brockovich is right there. She's playing this little bit part. She's a waitress in a diner. So you're watching this movie about Erin Brockovich, and you don't even see Erin Brockovich because you're not looking. You're not looking. That's part of what Jesus is saying to us. It's a young man who was studying cello, and he was working with Pablo Casals, and he was working on a most difficult piece. And finally, he got it down, and he played it for Pablo, and he played it perfectly. He said, I knew that I had played it flawlessly, and I was looking for high praise from the master. Instead, I heard him say, you're playing the notes, but not the music. Playing the notes, but not the music. If you're not looking up, if you're not looking to God in life, you may get the notes right, the steps right, but you won't have the music of the kingdom. Now, the second problem is that oftentimes people look in the wrong direction or look for the wrong things. There was a hungry man who was passing a store, and he happened to see in the window a sign that said, we sell bread. He thought, perfect. And so he went in the store, he put his money on the counter, and he said, I'd like some bread. The woman behind the counter said, we don't have any bread. He said, yes, you do. The sign in your window says you sell bread. She goes, oh no, we make signs, like the one that says we sell bread. We don't sell bread, we sell signs. That's how it is with some of us sometimes. We get distracted. We miss what's true. But that's what it's not. It may look like it. Comedian Paul Reiser, who's in Mad About You, I always like that. Calvin Klein was in it. He admits to being a sucker for electronics. Some of you may have this same disease. He said, I was in the stereo store looking at a VCR, CD player, laser disc, pant presser combination thing. I wasn't even thinking of getting it. I was just looking around. The salesman comes over and said, you know, that CD player holds up to 20 CDs at once. Yeah? Yes, sir, Bob, he said. That's almost 18 hours of music. 18 hours? Oh, okay. And so the salesman wrapped it up. When he got home, he realized, wait a second, that's 18 hours of music. I'm not even awake 18 hours. The last 4 hours of that stuff is going to keep me awake. It's not something I really need. And then he concludes by saying, the problem is they keep coming up with technology nobody asks for. They believe we want freeze frame search, split screen, 14-day timers, clocks that make coffee, and cameras that talk. We don't want that. You know what I want? I just want to lie down. That's really all I want. If I could just lie down for a half an hour, I'd be so happy. I've been reading instructions since 1987. That's why I don't want a new phone. The first message is to look up, to see God in your life. Now, looking up might not always be looking up, it might be looking out, and usually it is looking out. Those are weaknesses. The second message is that the bread that brings life has many forms. Has many forms. As Jesus is the bread of life to us, he comes to us in our need, and very often it's not in the low. It may be in someone who comes to us with a word of blessing, and occasionally the bread of life is us sharing life with other people. It comes in different forms. 1982, during the NCAA basketball tournament, the finals came down to Georgetown and North Carolina. Either one I like. But North Carolina was ahead by 1 point with just a little bit of time left. And Sleepy Floyd, who was the point guard for Georgetown, was bringing the ball up and had a brain freeze, and he threw it to a member of North Carolina, which meant North Carolina would win the championship in Georgetown. You can imagine, he felt terrible. The first person who went to him was his coach, John Thompson, a big old guy. Now you can imagine, he'd just been deprived the national championships, something everyone aspires to. He went up to Sleepy, and instead of berating him, he gave him a hug. They sat down on the bench together. John Thompson offered him a way of looking up. That's the bread of life. It comes in different ways. In Robert Frost's poem, Death of a Hired Man, Vermont farmer discovers the town drunk is sleeping up in his barn. The farmer has tried to help the old man throughout the years, but he's never come through. The old man always disappointed. He proved worthless time and time again. On one occasion, he was hired by the farmer to work, and at harvest time, he left, leaving the farmer short-handed. At that point, the farmer vowed, never again, never again. So now, after a number of years, he finds this old drunk has come back and is asleep in his hayloft. And angrily, he tells his wife he's going to run him off. His wife realizes that he's dying. He's near death. And she pleads with her husband to show mercy. She says to him, he's come home to die, Tom. He has no place to go but here. He has no one but you, with nothing to look back on in pride and nothing to look forward in hope. He's come home to die. The bread of life offers us a home to come to. Sometimes it's a new home, a joyous start. And sometimes it's just a place that's familiar and comfortable so that we can die. The bread of life takes many forms, but it always offers us a way home, a way to live, and sometimes a way to find life in dying. I'm going to show you in a minute a clip. It comes from it's a family-friendly movie, but it has some language in it, but it won't in this clip. It's called The War. Kevin Costner plays a Vietnam vet whose name's Stephen. He comes home from the war. Because of what the war has done to his mind, he's not able to hold the job. But he does his best with his family to provide them with a moral grounding. For his daughter and his family living in a small town in Mississippi, he works very hard at trying to teach them not to be prejudiced. And he does such a good job that his daughter Lydia, his best friend, is an African-American girl. He has a tougher time with Stephen because he tries to teach him the lessons of nonviolence. He learned during the war what violence does. And so he's worked with Stu. Now, it's a lesson that's very important to Stu because his children are involved with kind of a war of their own with the tough Lipnicki children. They're wild kids. Their father is the owner of the local junkyard. And on one occasion, they're at the fair, and Stephen goes to get some cotton candy. And the Lipnicki kids surround Stu, and they beat on him. By the time Stephen gets back, he breaks up the fight. He notices that a couple of the Lipnicki kids are sitting over by themselves, glaring at him. And he walks over to them, and they kind of flinch, not sure what he's going to do to them. And Stephen gives them the cotton candy. Stu is furious. He said, "Don't you know who they are? They just beat me up. Why are you doing this?" And he says to them, because it looked like no one had done anything nice for them in a long time. The bread of life comes as cotton candy. Let's take a look.
My name's Lydia Simmons, and this is my brother Stu.
She doing anything else I should know about?
She's doing a lot of things, but I don't think you should know about them.
Ever since my dad returned from the war, things haven't quite been the same. Now it's summer in Mississippi. And us kids are building a house of our very own. There's only one thing standing between us and a perfect summer.
The Lipnickis are coming!
Get lost. Better not have to lay claim to this here fort.
I hope you know them, the kids that just beat me up.
I know who they are, son.
Well, then why'd you just give them Mom and Lydia's cotton candy?
Because it looked like they hadn't been given nothing in a long time.
It's a wonderful story, and it shows that the bread of life can be most anything. anything that meets a need, that offers new life, new possibilities. We are called to serve the bread of life. That is Jesus. And we are also called to serve the bread of life.